Happy Halloween week, everybody. Happy final week of the off season. One more week until we start college basketball games that count. Welcome back for another episode of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. I'm Zach Farmer. We are less than a week away from the start of the official start of the season, November 6th. We will have games that count. I am really excited to get this finally all going. We can stop talking about the what ifs, the what might happen, and we can start talking about the what is happening. I'm really excited to kind of see how this is all going to start, what we're going to see, and all that. And in this episode, I'll go over my final picks, my final predictions for the season. So I'll go over my final standings, and then also I'll pick some end of the year awards in my predictions of what it's going to be this coming season. But I do want to start off on a front that is a little bit more negative, at least on a college basketball front. And earlier or last week, it was announced that the NCAA announced that the NIT would be changing its format going into this year. And the first and foremost thing, say goodbye to the auto bid for regular season conference champions. And what will now be the auto bids to the NIT will be teams from the two highest net rated teams from the Power Six, from the power conferences, the Big 12, the Big 10, the Pac 12, the SEC, the ACC. And they will now get automatic bids into the NIT, and there will not be any more auto bids for the non-power conferences. And this, as many other college basketball people talked about, wrote about, is a terrible, terrible thing for college basketball. I was so upset when I saw the news because it rips away at the competitiveness of what this is supposed to be. This is a tier 2. Yes, it's a tier 2 postseason tournament, but the NIT has history to it. The NIT has always been part of the college basketball fabric and an important part of the college basketball landscape. It allows the opportunity for teams that don't make the NCAA tournament to have something else. And for a lot of teams, the value is from, or at least the teams who have the most value or carry the most value in that tournament are the mid-majors. I mean, when you see like the likes of a Stanford make the NIT, it's like, does it matter that much? Probably not. But does it matter for a team like Stephen F. Austin? Does it matter for a team like Santa Clara, for USF? I mean, there are plenty of WCC teams that are perfect examples of teams of getting to the NIT would be a big deal. And obviously, like that, saying that they would get an auto bid or something like that may be a little, that's a big stretch, because the regular season champion of the WCC would make the NCAA tournament in more cases than not. But this is a serious move against the spirit of what we look at sports to be, because you're rewarding these mediocre power conference teams who really don't care much to be there in the first place. We've seen there's been plenty of times when we've seen power conference teams just skip out on the NIT and decide not to take the invitation. We've seen that in the past. We've also especially now with the way the transfer portal works, how many of these guys are going to be around? What's going to be the real value to play in the NIT for these power conferences? I just don't know where that's going to come from. I don't know if there is enough of a viewing perspective for those teams, because really, if you're in a power conference, the goal is to get to the NCAA tournament. I mean, that's everybody's goal, but for most power conference schools, that's really the place you're you have a much higher chance of getting to than if you're in a smaller conference. If you're in a smaller conference, there's a way better chance of you actually getting into the NIT than there is into the NCAA tournament, because not only, let's say, you have to win your regular season, but you also have to be a tournament champion as well. It's like, so this just felt all bad. It felt all wrong. And everybody who knows the situation better than I do. I saw Mid-Major Madness get a couple of mid-major coaches off the record who really were disappointed in what the NCAA's decision was. And even I saw one report, one quote that they had is that the NCAA didn't consult any of the conference leadership about this. This was a change made without consultation, without any sort of reasoning given to the conferences. This was a move solely by the NCAA, and this one sucks. This really, really sucks. And more so to the point, as others have also pointed this out, it was something that I thought of immediately as well. This is the precursor potentially for them doing the same thing to the NCAA tournament. We've already seen that Fox is working with a couple of the power conferences to develop their own postseason tournament. And yes, what has been done to the NIT is in direct response to that. That was also reported that the NCAA did acknowledge it's in direct reasoning because of that tournament. It helps to keep more of the power conferences inside the NIT as opposed to going to this other tournament. But then also, we know that there has been talk about expanding the NCAA tournament, which I have warmed more to the idea of that. But also, what happens if say this experiment with the NIT has any level of showing it might be profitable? Is it going to bleed over to the NCAA tournament? A lot of people do fear that. I'm definitely concerned over that, especially with the way realignment is going. And realignment is part of this conversation as well. It's why we see the likes of Gonzaga trying to jump to a bigger conference, because the writing seems to be on the wall that that is the next step. That is the potential next move that the NCAA will make, as the power conferences will become the power of the NCAA tournament and may try to push the little conferences out. And obviously right now it is speculation, but a lot of people are trying to connect the dots. I'm trying to connect the dots here, that it seems that is the direction we are going. I hope that is not the direction we are going. But it does seem it's not looking good. I'm not optimistic about the moves that were made because with the NIT and what that could mean moving forward. All right. So I'm going to transition over into the season picks, and I'll get off the NIT comment because as my costume for those who aren't listening, those who are just listening, not watching, it's like there is no crying in baseball. There's no crying in basketball. So I will move on. So for those just listening, not watching, Halloween costume is Jimmy Dugan from League of Their Own. So with that, we'll move on to the season picks and where I think everybody's going to land. So I'm going to run through my standings first and where I think everyone is going to be. And my list is probably going to sound pretty familiar with a lot of others that have already come out, because I think it's pretty well established where most everybody's going to fall. So here we go. 1 through 9, and I will start at the bottom and work my way up. So at number 9, I have San Diego. I think it's pretty clear that this San Diego team is going to struggle for a lot of this year. They are very young. They have a couple of veterans on the squad, but this team is going to be going through a lot of growing pains. Also, I don't think they have a whole lot of opportunity to really challenge themselves in the non-conference, which I do think is going to hurt them once they get to WCC play. I do think we're still going to get I do think we're still going to see a lot out of Wayne McKinney. I really like what he has been able to bring the last couple of years. I do think we're going to see more out of him. I do think that that's still something to kind of watch for. San Diego is not going to be a complete pushover, but I get the feeling that they're going to be largely a pushover this season. And, like these first couple of years under Steve Lavin aren't going to look the best, but it's because they had to tear it all down. And I really think this looks more like year one for Steve Lavin than last year did. But so I have them coming in ninth. All right, coming in eighth, I'm going with Pepperdine. And the Waves are this again. I have said this over and over and over. This team has talent. This team should not have finished where it had finished the last couple of years. They seem like they should be too good to finish in dead last. But that's where they were a year ago, and I don't expect that to change all that much. Because this team is less talented than it was a year ago. You still have Houston Millette. You still have Javon Porter. Javon Porter might be the best NBA prospect in the WCC this year. I don't think that this is a squad. I don't think that this is a team that's going to really. I don't think they're going to do all too much. I do think we're going to see more out of Malik Moore. So I'm not saying that there's not going to be things to watch for this team. I think they're going to be a fun team to watch. I just don't think they're going to be able to put too many wins together going into WCC play. They lost Max Lewis. They lost Carson Basham. They lost Jan Zedek. They lost Mike Mitchell. A lot of pieces no longer there. Ethan Anderson, I think, is going to be helpful, the UC Davis transfer. He's going to give them a lot more leadership. Hopefully a little bit more stability. But that said, I still am going to have Pepperdine coming in eighth this season. In 7, I have Pacific. And I have Pacific here because I do think that they were greater than the sum of their parts a year ago. They did finish tied for 5th a year ago. I don't see them finishing that high this year because they did lose a couple of key pieces. I thought this Pacific team does still have some nice pieces. I really like Mo Odom. I'm really excited to kind of see him in year 2. They still have Tyler Beard. With increased minutes, I think it's going to be a good thing for this Pacific squad. I think they're going to be they'll be a more well-balanced team. I think they'll be a better team, but I don't think that they're going to finish better in the standings. I do still think they will be kind of stuck there in that lower tier of the WCC, and I do have them coming in 7th this season. In 6th is Portland, and Portland I feel is this team in between. They are not quite with the grouping of LMU, Santa Clara, USF, but they are above the level of Pacific, Pepperdine, and San Diego. This Portland squad still has maybe one of the best players in the league in Tyler Robertson. They still have one of the better scorers in Chris Austin. They have some interesting pieces coming in. They did bring in some more size, which was key. This was one of the smallest teams, if not the smallest team in the WCC a year ago. Their interior presence has been an issue for the last couple of years. And that is where Shante Leggins tried to shore up this roster. He did try to fill out that front line a little bit more. I don't think that they have done enough on that front to be able to kind of move up into that next tier. I do think so. I think they're going to hang around that 6-7 area. But right now, with the experience they have and the explosive scoring that they do have, I'm going to keep Portland right there at the 6th spot. Okay, next at number 5, this is where it got tricky because I really do think that USF, LMU, and Santa Clara are all interchangeable in these next 3. And while I'm going to pick them, I am definitely not. I struggled the most with these next 3, and after doing some more evaluation, thinking about it a little bit more, at 5, I'm going with Santa Clara. Santa Clara has finished in 3rd the last couple of years. They also had NBA first rounders on each of those teams. They also had a core group of guys that were a part of both of those teams. And that core group is gone. Jaden Bediako is gone. Parker Brown is gone. Keyshawn Justice is gone. You had some veteran presence on those last 2 years of teams that is no longer there. A lot of new pieces have come in. Carlos Marshall does come back from injury, and he does look like he's healthy and ready to go. You do bring in Adama Ball, who everyone's going to point to and say, like, that could be the next guy. But this is a team that is going to have 5 new starters this year. And while I think this is Santa Clara's deepest team under Herb Sendek, I think that this is going to be a dogfight in conference play. And I do think that Santa Clara is going to come up just a little bit behind the next 2 teams when it comes to the WCC standings. And so if they're finishing in 5th, then they're going to just miss that picking up that bye out of the first round. All right, number 4. I'm going with LMU. LMU to me is going to be one of the toughest, more physical teams in this league because that front line is brutal. Between Kelly Laupepe, between Rick Asanza, you bring in Lars Thyman, you bring in, you still have Michael Graham, you still have Alex Merkvaladze. This is a big, big team, and now they're deep in those positions as well. And that's something that is going to be really helpful as they get deeper and deeper into WCC play is having that size and being able to match up with some of the bigger teams in the league, mainly St. Mary's and Gonzaga. They're already going to be bigger than most everybody else. Santa Clara is also a big team. USF has gotten bigger themselves. So this is where I think LMU's strength will be. And then it's a matter of what can they get from the guards. You're trying to replace Cam Shelton, and you're going to have a slew of guys running in and out of these rotations. And Stan Johnson was on a couple weeks ago, and we talked about those rotations. And there's no one really who, everyone is kind of giving them what they expected. And that means that there's a lot of depth to their guard spots. That means there's going to be a lot of pieces that you can point to, a lot of pieces that are probably going to contribute well to this team. I mean, you can look at Justice Hill, who I think is going to be a big part of that. I think Justin Wright's going to be a big part of that. It's going to be interesting to see how quickly Dominic Harris adjusts. And this is a guy who's very familiar with the WCC. Although he didn't get a ton of playing time, he's still familiar with all the playbooks and the strategies of the teams in this conference. So I think that's going to be really fascinating to see how LMU runs all these guards and what the rotations start to look like and who really starts to separate themselves as non-conference rolls on and as we get into league play. I think it's going to be very close between LMU and 3rd place, which right now I do have as being USF. USF to me well, not even just to me. They have been the most consistent WCC team, not named St. Mary's or Gonzaga, over the last 8 years. They've had 20 or more wins in 7 of the last 8 years. The one they didn't was the pandemic year. They've had a rotating cast of characters, and they are able to almost just check off 20 wins every year. And while they haven't finished in third in quite a while, it's still an opportunity for them to really establish themselves as the new number 3 of this conference after BYU is left. And that's true for Santa Clara and for LMU as well. With BYU gone, even though BYU finished lower in the standings than they had thought over the last couple of years, that they were still the number 3. It's like it was the three-headed monster of Gonzaga, St. Mary's, BYU. Even if BYU's on-court results weren't what we expected the last couple of years. So who is going to step into that role? Who is going to be that next team? It could be USF. It could be Santa Clara. It could be LMU. USF has been the most consistent. That's why I have them here. I'm really interested to see if Mongolian Mike Sharavjans is going to meet the expectations, the high, lofty expectations that a lot of people have. One of the pieces I really like, I think, is going to be solid from the immediacy is going to be Jonathan Mogbo, one of the better defenders when he was at Missouri State. So I think there are pieces on this team. I really do like what Coach Gulofson has been able to put together there at USF going into this year. I think Marcus Williams, I think, is going to be a huge piece to that. I really liked Isaiah Hawthorne a year ago. Newberry also played really well down the stretch. You bring in Malik Thomas, you bring in Stefan Todorovic. Like, there are a lot of really nice pieces on this USF team. They're going to be deep as well, but it's going to be a learning process for them. I think they're going to get way more challenged in the non-conference. Their schedule is still pretty good. So I think because they're going to get challenged more in the non-conference, because they're going to be deep, much like LMU is going to be, I see this USF team as separating itself and being that third team, the number 3 team in the WCC. Okay, now we come down to number 2 and number 1. And at number 2, this one was so hard because I could have put either team at 2. I could have put either team at 1. And for the sake of what we know today, know what? No. Initially I was going to say what we know today. I'm going to extrapolate this out and think of what we are going to know in February and in March, and what we saw even a year ago when Gonzaga stumbles, they are able to come back. I think this is going to be by the slimmest of margins. While I do think that this is a 50-50 coin flip, I'm going to say St. Mary's comes in second and it will be Gonzaga first. And here's why. I'm going to do it in that order because St. Mary's, and last year we saw this from St. Mary's. They went into conference play so incredibly hot. They were playing so well in the first half of conference play, and Gonzaga was not playing well at all. They dropped the game to LMU. They almost lost at Pacific. They almost lost at USF. They looked like they were reeling. And then they went into Moraga, and then they lost in Moraga, and it really didn't look good for Gonzaga going into the back half of conference play. And then they figured it out. And then something clicked. And all the pieces started coming together. And this is something that we know that Gonzaga, the way they try to build their team, they're not trying to be their best in December, to be their best in January. They're trying to be their best in February and March. And that's that's what I'm going to bank on because it I've been it's hard to bet against them the deeper you go into a season. Gonzaga has the pieces. We know what we're going to get from Ryan Nembhard. We know what we're going to get from Anton Watson. I think we're going to see a huge uptick from Nolan Hickman. I think we're going to see if he's healthy, Graham Ike is one of the best big men in the country. They aren't deep, which is still the issue with Gonzaga. But we also know that Mark Few won't go too deep onto his bench anyway. He may only go 7, 8 players maybe deep, and that'll be it. And I think that's what's going to give Gonzaga the edge as we get closer and closer to the end of conference play. That's why I will pick them first over St. Mary's, who will be in second. This might be a 1-game difference. This might be even a co-championship again. I mean, St. Mary's is going to be right there with them the whole way. You have Aiden Mahaney, who is one of the best players in the country, who arguably could be the player of the year this year. You bring back Mitchell Saxon, who is also one of the better centers on the West Coast. You bring back Alex Dukas, who is one of the better three-point shooters and is tough as nails. Augustus Marciulionis, I think, is going to make a huge step. Just what we've seen in the game against Hawaii, and then also just getting some notes from the secret scrimmage against Fresno State. This team can now score, and which is one of the things we did not see last year or the year before, where St. Mary's really struggled at times to find their offense. I don't think this team is going to have trouble finding their offense. I think what this team is going to struggle with maybe a little bit more, not to say struggle, but I don't think they're going to be as good of a defensive team as they were a year ago, just for the sake that you don't have Logan Johnson and Kyle Bowen. So I think this is going to be really close. If you say it's Gonzaga, I'll believe you. If you say it's St. Mary's, I'll believe you. It's going to be one of those two. It's going to be really close. I expect that last week and a half of the season really to make the difference between who ends up the 1 seed in Vegas, whether it's Gonzaga or it's St. Mary's. Okay, so the end of the year awards. So the WCC hands out 5 of them every year. Newcomer, 6-man, coach of the year, defensive player, and then player of the year. We had co-players of the year last year. I will not be doing co-players of the year. So I'll run down who I think each of these awards are going to go to, and we'll take it from there. So I'm going to start with 6-man. This one is difficult because, one, I think there's a number of guys who could end up with this award. But the other challenge is because there are so many new pieces, I don't know who is going to be coming off the bench for the majority of the season. So it's hard because I was starting to look up and down the USF roster. I was starting to look up and down the Santa Clara roster, the LMU roster, St. Mary's, Gonzaga. And I was trying to find who's going to be the 6th man off these teams. So I had to go with someone, and with the teams I felt were more solidified on that front. And as I thought about the development of this player, I think it became pretty obvious who my 6-man pick was going to be, and that's Ben Gregg at Gonzaga. Ben Gregg has continuously been one of the better role players in the WCC. He's a guy who he would start for almost any other WCC team, and he would average double figures. He would be probably a 7-8 rebound per game guy. He can beat you inside. He can beat you outside. Ben Gregg is going to be so critical for Gonzaga's success this year, spelling Graham Ike, spelling Anton Watson. I expect him to be probably near a 20-minute per game guy going in this year, 15 to 20 minutes per game, and I would think it's going to be closer to 20. Ben Gregg, I think, very easily becomes that 6th man of the year this year. again, without kind of knowing like how we're going to see what USF, Santa Clara, LMU, or any other team start to establish their rosters and their roles. A lot of new pieces. Ben Gregg, known guy. You know what his role is going to be. He's going to be that sixth man. I'm taking Ben Gregg. All right, next one. I'm going to go with Coach of the Year. Most years we have seen in the WCC, ends up either being Mark Few or it ends up being Randy Bennett. And I will not be picking either of them for this one because I think that this is a year where the team who is able to separate themselves most from the other group is going to be that guy. Seeing who, like, whether it be Herb Sendek, whether it be Stan Johnson, Chris Grulefson, if Portland pops out of nowhere, maybe it's Shante Liggins. But as I started thinking about this, I think, and I mentioned it as I was rolling through all of my predictions for the standings, the team I think that's going to do best, the team I think that is going to separate itself best is going to be USF. So I'm taking Chris Grulefson over on the hilltop to be Coach of the Year this year. I think he was able to hold the program steady last year in year one after the NCAA tournament run. Obviously, he was first year in that job, a lot of new pieces, and you're trying to really reestablish what that team is going to be and what the roster pieces are going to be. I think he's done a really good job of retooling this Don's team. They look the part. The schedule looks the part. Now the biggest task is to go out there and get it done. And if they get it done, I think he's going to be he's going to be on that short list for Coach of the Year in the WCC. All right. So next I'll get to is going to be Defensive Player of the Year. And this one felt obvious, but the more I thought about it, the less obvious it was. Because the obvious answer, the easy answer, would have been for me to say Anton Watson. Because he was arguably the Defensive Player of the Year last year, and he did not end up with the award. It very easily could have been him. It could have, but as I could have gone with Mitchell Saxon, who also I think is going to be in that conversation. I don't think there's any solidified guards at the moment who are going to be part of that. So the other name that really popped in my mind, and I think because this is why he was brought in, I think that the Defensive Player of the Year award is going to go. I think it's going to be Jonathan Mogbo at USF. I think if USF is going to make the leap, make a jump this year, he's going to be a big part of that. Because the one thing that this team was missing a year ago, the thing that they've missed most of these years in which they've had this 20 win year run, is the presence inside. They did not have someone who can be that lockdown guy, that rim protector inside. And that's what Mogbo can bring. That's what he's going to be able to do for USF. So if USF it does do what I expect them to do, he's going to be a big part of that, and I think he could. And I'm going to pick him to be Defensive Player of the Year going into 24. Okay, so that leaves Newcomer of the Year and Player of the Year. And I left Newcomer of the Year to this point because my Player of the Year is also then has to be the Newcomer of the Year. And that's Ryan Nembhard. I think this is going to be a very close pick between Nembhard and Mahaney, or at least going into the year, that's where like the 1-2 would be. And I'm picking Nembhard slightly over Mahaney because of Nemhard's experience. He has one more year of college under his belt. We have seen what Ryan Nemhard can do in the NCAA tournament. We have seen what he can do in the biggest moments. And not to say that we haven't already seen Mahaney do things in the biggest moments, because we have. But what I like about Ryan Nemhard is that he is that more traditional point guard. He is the point guard that this Gonzaga team was missing a year ago. He's going to bring that steadiness. He's going to bring that playmaking ability, and he can be that scorer when need be. Last year, his assisted turnover was 2.29. He dropped 30 on Baylor in the Sweet 16 a year ago in the tournament. This is a guy I think who's going to be able to step in almost immediately. He's obviously familiar with the system because his brother was in the system just a couple years ago. Ryan Nemhard's going to make a very smooth transition into Gonzaga. He's going to make his teammates better. I think he's going to make Nolan Hickman a better player just by his presence alone. So going into the year, my player of the year, also newcomer of the year, is going to be Ryan Nemhard. Okay, so to recap. So player of the year, Ryan Nemhard, newcomer Nemhard, DPOY, Jonathan Mogbo, coach of the year, Chris Gerlefson, sixth man, Ben Gregg. And then my standings going 1 to 9, I'll go back the other direction. I'm taking Gonzaga 1, St. Mary's 2, USF, LMU, Santa Clara, then Portland Pacific, Pepperdine, and San Diego. And wanted to make one announcement before I wrap the episode up. So on this coming Thursday, November 2nd, I will be doing a YouTube live Stitch Twitch stream as well. I'll be having Rocco Miller from the Bracketeer, Connor Hope from the Heat Check college basketball podcast, and then Andy Patton from Locked On Zags on, and we will do a roundtable for the WCC, doing one last primer for this 23-24 season. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Be sure to check it out. That'll be at 6:30 on Thursday, November 2nd. You can find it on YouTube and then also on Twitch if you want to head over there. You can find more of the information on Twitter, where I'm posting a lot of the other information. Also, just as an FYI, there is also now a podcast dedicated account on Twitter, on X, and that's at off WCC Pod. So go ahead and follow the account there. You can find it on my account. I have it tagged in there as well. So be sure to follow that account, subscribe to the other channels, so make sure you're keeping up to date on all of the new content that's coming out. Less than a week before the start of college basketball season, I am glad I'm finally done with all the previews and all of the hyperbole and all of this talk, and I am ready for some basketball. Finally, we get to see basketball once again. I'm excited. I know you're excited. So let's just get to it. And the big games begin next week. So thanks for listening. Thanks for hanging out and going through my previews all summer long. I'm excited for the season. So until next week, have a good holiday week, Halloween week, and I will catch you later.